Welcome back to the MOOC course titled Qualitative Research Methods. My name is Aradhana Malik and I'm helping you with this course. And we've done a variety of things till now. We were talking about case studies as a strategy of qualitative inquiry. Now today we will talk about something very interesting, and it's called analyzing interpretive practice. So let's move on. This is from an article by Gubrium and Holstein in the Handbook of Qualitative Research Methods. I really like that book because it gives you such a comprehensive overview of what qualitative research methods are, and it's a very nice book to have. It's heavy, and the experts from various specialized areas of qualitative research methods have contributed to this book. So this is the best book by far that is available in the if you really want to learn about qualitative research methods. And it's a very difficult book to understand, but it's really worth having. So this is from that book. What is analysis and what is interpretive practice? Now, analysis tells us what is being accomplished, under what conditions, and out of what resources. So when we talk about analysis, we are trying to find out, what is it? Analysis helps us understand what is our work giving us, what is being accomplished, what are we getting out of all the effort that we are putting in, then under what conditions. So what is the context in which we are getting the output that we are getting, and out of what resources, what do we have to work with, how are we going through what we have, what are the tools we are using, how are we getting the output, what are we, in which context are we getting the output, etc. So that is what analysis tells us. Now, interpretive practice engages both the hows and the whats of social reality. What is it and how are we getting it? What is social reality and how is it being constituted? It is centered not in how people methodically construct their experiences and their words. So when we talk about interpretive practice, we are essentially talking about finding out how do people make sense of their worlds. We experience something, and then with that experience comes 1, sensation, 2, perception. Now I am talking in psychological terms. So we sense something, our sensory organs inform us about the world around us. Then we perceive, we make a picture of whatever our sensory organs have informed us about in our minds. And then we situate that picture, that understanding, or that sense of what we draw boundaries around whatever our sensory organs have told us, and then in order to understand it, we put that picture in a context and we say this is what it was linked to, this is what it is going to be linked to, this is where it is coming from, this is what it is leading to. So we give it a life, and that is called interpretation. That is the interpretive practice. How do we know what we know is interpretive practice. So we situate whatever we understand within a context, and we try to understand how we situate whatever we perceive within a context, we connect it to its environment, we find out what we are doing in order to arrive, so we at the conclusion that we have arrived at. So we try and understand where our understanding is coming from, and we analyze, or we go into how we are arriving at that understanding. What are the resources we are using? What is whatever we have understood connected to? How do we know that X is X and Y is Y? That is interpretive practice. Some conceptual bases of analysis and interpretive practice are, there are 4 bases that we will discuss in this lecture and the next lecture. The first one is phenomenology. and within phenomenology we will talk about typification. Then we will talk about ethno-methodological formulations, we will talk about conversation analysis, and we will talk about Foucauldian discourse analysis. So Foucault, again we will talk about discourse analysis from the perspective of Foucauldian philosophy, and that is what we will discuss. Phenomenological sociology. This comes, Schutz was the one who introduced it, and according to Schutz, phenomenological sociology aimed to explain how it is that the life world is actually produced and experienced by individuals. The aim of phenomenological sociology is to effectively study the everyday world. The social, to effectively study the everyday world, the social inquirer must bracket or suspend one's taken for granted attitude towards its existence. The inquirer must assume the attitude of a disinterested observer. So again, we will come to it when we talk about analytic bracketing. But then what happens is that we go in, we were talking about zooming in and zooming out in ethnography. Now the inquirer must understand things, situations, whatever is being studied within the context. So the inquirer needs to understand the connections between whatever one is studying and the world around it and the situatedness of the concept. At the same time, the inquirer must have the ability to draw boundaries and say, okay, this is where it is situated, now let me take it out of that situation and draw a boundary around it so that I can classify this as a concept, not as a piece of something else. So I can draw a boundary around it and I can say this is one unit of the larger set of concepts that I am studying, and it belongs in this category. So you bring it out of the context and you say, okay, this is where it stops, this is how it is connected, these are the things that define its connectedness, and then you come out of it and say this is characteristic A, B, C, D, E. So instead of putting it on a continuum, we make the series discrete in terms of describing it, and we say, okay, this, these are the different characteristics, and we bracket it, we draw boundaries around it, we come out of the situation and see it from the perspective of a disconnected observer. And then, so we don't, the social inquirer must suspend one's taken for granted attitude towards its existence, towards the existence of the everyday world. The inquirer must assume the attitude of a disinterested observer. From the perspective of an interested observer, we can see why things are going the way they are going. We can understand things that may not be happening in a systematic, logical, programmable, routine, repeatable manner. But at the same time, from the perspective of a disinterested observer, we have to say, okay, yes, I can see where this is coming from. But then, but I need to stop thinking like a member of the situation. I need to stop thinking like a part of the situation and see what an outsider may feel in order to get a rounded view. So the subtleties need, we need to at some point ignore the very, very, very subtle things that help us get a richer feel for the concept, and then draw out of the situation and say, how would I see this concept if I was not part of the situation? And this going back and forth is what phenomenological sociology does. Okay. Phenomenology. Phenomenologists insist on careful description of ordinary conscious experience of everyday life, the life world. So, a description of things, the essential structures of consciousness as one experiences them. These things we experience include perception. I told you, what we see, what are our senses informing us about. So, these things we experience, so we experience something through sheer perception. Our sensation is what the sensory organs inform us about. Perception is drawing boundaries around these sensations, filtering out the meaningful sensations from the meaningless sensations and giving them some sort of a definition. A collection of sensations is given a definition, and this defined collection of sensations is known as perception. When we say, okay, in order for us to know what X is, this is how we define it, this is what we understand from it, whatever we don't understand doesn't become a part of our understanding of the concept. Believing is another one. Remembering, deciding, feeling, judging, evaluating, all experiences of bodily action and so forth. So, it's initially it is perception, and then we start situating the perception in feelings. Evaluating, remembering, connecting it to past experiences, deciding whether we want to remember it or not, how do we want to remember it, attaching emotions to what we have experienced, judging, is it worth my attention or not, is it good, is it bad, putting it on a continuum of comfortable, uncomfortable, worthy, unworthy, etc. Evaluating all experiences of bodily action and so forth. So, it's a careful description of ordinary conscious experience of everyday life. We take everyday life and we try and understand why we understand life the way we do. Okay. Phenomenological descriptions of such things are possible only by turning from things to their meaning, from what is to the nature of what is. So, sorry, there is a double turning here, I need to remove that word, there is a misprint here, but only by turning away from things to their meaning. So, we need to turn away from what we are seeing, what we are experiencing, to trying to understand their meaning. What is? We turn from what is to the nature of what is. How is what is? This turning away can be accomplished only by a certain phenomenological reduction or epoch that entails bracketing or suspending what Husserl calls the natural attitude. The natural, and we don't have time to go into all these details, but the natural attitude is what helps us understand things within their context. We need to distance ourselves, we need to suspend this inclination towards the natural attitude, pull away from it and see things from the perspective of a disinterested observer who is not part of the situation and is still trying to understand the situation. And this is what quantitative research methods does. You know, when we talk about objectivity in research, when we talk about quantification of quantifying research, we talk about the perspective of a disinterested observer who is trying to see things as they are and trying their best not to situate their own selves within the observation of the concepts they are trying to study. Okay, so that is what we do. The natural attitude is the everyday assumption of the independent existence of what is perceived and thought about. So, that this is phenomenology. Okay. Some variants of phenomenology are existential phenomenology, which is more oriented towards describing the experience of everyday life as it is internalized in the subjective consciousness of individuals. So, we describe everyday life as we remember it, as we experience it, as it is internalized, experienced, remembered, as it becomes a part of our individuals. memory. The other variant of phenomenology is hermeneutics. We haven't had a chance to go into hermeneutics, so we'll do that now. Hermeneutics is ontological, universal and conversational. Hermeneutics is a variant of phenomenology. Hermeneutics is ontological because understanding is our very mode of being in the world, so it helps us know. It is universal because understanding underlies all human activity. So everybody needs to, or all human activity needs to be understood. Conversational because the interpretation of an object is always a dialogical encounter. As interpreters, we participate in, open ourselves to, share in and listen to the claims that the object is making on us. So we go back and forth and we clarify our understanding of what is, and we interact with the object of our understanding, and we try and by associating with the object, our understanding of the object is also affected. So it is conversational. Understanding is always open and anticipatory. One never achieves a final complete interpretation. This is so because we are always interpreting in light of prejudice or prejudgment or preconception that comes from the tradition of which we are a part. So understanding is always a product of, it is always open and anticipatory. So we are looking for an understanding, we are anticipating that our understanding will be applicable to whatever it is that we are trying to understand. It's not final, it is not it's anticipatory. We hope that it is going to be as close to the actual experience as possible. Then and the reason for this is because we are always trying to understand something within the light of prejudgment, prejudice, preconception, within the light of what we have known and understood in the past, within the light of how we situate concepts within their contexts, how we have understood, how we have learnt to situate whatever it is that we are trying to understand within different contexts. So understanding is always situated within a context, and my understanding of a situation is going to be governed by how I have been taught and how I have learned to understand similar concepts in similar contexts. So that will influence how I perceive something new. I will try and connect it with something that I have been either taught or learned through the course of my life subconsciously. Okay. Now this tradition constitutes the horizon in which we do our thinking. So the tradition that influences our understanding of particular concepts will influence how we think, how we perceive, how we learn, how we connect different things here. The tradition, the background, my training, my exposure, my experiences, your experiences, everybody, it affects our frames of reference as researchers. It affects how we treat what we are presented with. It affects how we do life, how we treat whatever we see, we hear, we experience. Okay. Language is understood as an activity that, like play, reflects an intentionality of meaning. Okay. So language is what gives the meaning and intentionality. The words we choose, how we describe, how we connect concepts, how we understand them, the words that we use have a very, very significant impact on how we understand and interpret whatever we are observing or experiencing or or the stimuli that we are presented with. So language is an essential part of hermeneutics, and that in turn is an essential element, or that is a variant of phenomenology. So the language that we use affects how we go ahead with and try to understand the concepts that we are faced with, or the situations that we are observing, because ultimately it depends on how we present, how we recreate whatever it is that we have understood. How do we understand it? We understand things in terms of meanings and pictures and images, and then a whole bunch of psychology will come in, so I don't want to get into that in the middle of this lecture. But then when we talk about ourselves as researchers, we use language to understand concepts, and language then defines what we understand and how much we understand, and the frame of reference we use to understand this. We have talked about this in the past. Okay, so this is all hermeneutics. Now a discussion on hermeneutics can go on for a long time, but we don't have time for that. We'll move on to one application of hermeneutics, of phenomenology, and that is called typification. Typification is a process that helps individuals to categorize their experiences or club them and link them to something they already know in order to understand what is going on. So we take our experiences and we club them and we draw boundaries around them and we link them, we link these boundaries to something that we already know. We say, aha, this is how this looks like this belongs in this category, this is similar to this is different from this. If something is starkly different, we draw boundaries around it and we say, okay, X is like this, but this is something totally opposite to whatever it is that we are talking about. So these categorizations are called typification. It's a process. Typification is a process that helps individuals categorize, classify their experiences, club them and link them to something they already know. So there is a connection, there is a category, and then there is a connection between, there are connections between these categories. Typification occurs usually through ordinary language in an environment that is concurrently constructed and experienced in fundamentally the same terms by all parties, even while mistakes may be made in its particular apprehensions. So it is happening through ordinary language, it is happening within an environment that is constructed concurrently and experienced in more or less the same way by the people who are part of that situation, by the people who are making these boundaries, even while mistakes may be made in its particular apprehension. So we try and draw these boundaries around whatever it is that we are trying to understand. Now that is all we have time for in this lecture. We will continue with some more discussion on the analysis of on analyzing interpretive practice in the next lecture. Thank you very much for listening.